I'm a big fan of the national parks. I spent a lot of time in them recently, and as I've noticed, so have a lot of other people. I wondered if there is a line between popularity and preservation, and it turns out this is a tension that has existed since our national park system was first conceived by our founding director, Stephen Mather, on what has come to be known as the Mather's Mountain Party.
He took a group of people into the parks, basically like the first glamping trip ever. This is mass photography, right? So people didn't know what these places looked like. He basically, asked them to go back and spread the word about these national parks. And then shortly thereafter, Congress passed the act. It was called the Organic Act that created the National Park Service.
In a way, they were too successful. And this gave rise to something called the Mather Paradox. And the whole idea behind the Mather Paradox is that the national parks should be managed for the enjoyment of the American people and at the same time keep them preserved for the enjoyment for future generations. That has gotten much more difficult in recent years.
Horseshoe Bend, for example, is a really popular National Park Service area, and that went from about 4,000 visitors a year to then, with the rise of Instagram and all of these iconic photos emerging and circulating on people's feeds, over 2 million visitors a year. That's huge.
How do you save something that is being loved to death? I've connected with national parks within my state to see if they're struggling to keep up with their popularity.
10 years ago, we were roughly about 500,000 visitors a year, 100,000, give or take 100,000. And last year, we counted 1.3 million. The infrastructure hasn't changed. Our parking lots are the same. A lot of our roads are literally old logging roads that aren't built wide enough to current standards, and culminating in a 50-car parking lot for Chapel Trailhead, for instance, that fills up first thing in the morning in the summer, and then it's just this crazy mess down there the rest of the day.
We're on a big pile of sand. The soils here it's all sand. We're in a coastal dune area, so just people wouldn't think. I don't think people recognize that they really can do a lot of damage just by walking off trail. We're protecting and preserving the things that have been deemed by the American people to be nationally significant, but doing it in such a way that allows people to enjoy it and learn about it, but in a way that doesn't damage it for future generations.
Now, even at Isle Royale National Park, one of the least visited national parks due to its remote location in Lake Superior, it's still not immune to the challenges of overcrowding.
While we might be talking about 20,000 visitors as a big year for us, but those 20,000 visitors in the backcountry certainly can have an impact on people's experiences in a wilderness park. So that's really kind of the angle that we're looking at.
Although the problems we see at each of the national parks can sometimes be quite similar, there is no magic solution to address overcrowding.
It's almost a daily struggle. We try to figure out how we can maintain access where it still looks and feels wild, and when we start fencing things off like that, it's just not the same. But we come up with these compromises and try to basically do the best we can.
How do you strike that balance between preservation and use? That's certainly something that every park has to face in some way or another.
We're trying to be a welcoming place for all. So we have to acknowledge that there's got to be those parking lots. There's got to be that infrastructure that allows everyone to enjoy the park. I mean, it's just so critical for people to kind of understand the environment that they're coming to, know what they can do and see. That's the challenge of the parks. They're here to be enjoyed for current and future generations. That's the National Park Service Organic Act says we're going to preserve the wildlife and therein and the objects therein, but we have to make it so that it's enjoyable for current and future generations.
For the first time in a long time, this issue was addressed in 2020 with the Great American Outdoors Act.
For more than 50 years, Congress has struggled to adequately fund land and water conservation, leading to a never-ending backlog of maintenance and other critical needs in our parks and public lands.
The bipartisan 2020 Great American Outdoors Act funded a $9.5 billion maintenance backlog, and while that is a great start, it does not fully fund all necessary repairs. As a member of Congress, I would prioritize our national park system. Visitor numbers clearly show they're working well, and I'm not sure why we would constantly underfund one of our strengths. I don't want maintenance backlogs. I want individual park units to be the proactive and innovative with their resources, not constantly trying to keep up. The Great American Outdoors Act was a great start, but it needs to be amended to meet the current park needs.